Often discussed, but rarely understood. This is how I think Visenya Targaryen is best described. She is either superficially appreciated for her badassery and aesthetics, or disparaged as a one-dimensional villain. Both of those frameworks serve to flatten her, even though Visenya's motivations for everything she did stayed consistent throughout her entire life, and it was neither the need to be a badass warrior, nor a boy mouse's deranged ambition. So let's talk about this character who, in spite of being quite straightforward, gets consistently misunderstood. Before we start, remember that if you like my content, like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. Also, you can listen to this on Spotify if you prefer. Check the link in the description. Visenya was the oldest of the 3 children of Lord Aegon Targaryen and Lady Valyna Velaryon. She had one brother Aegon, one sister Rhaenys, and one bastard half-brother Orys. From her youngest days, she trained alongside Aegon at arms and became a skilled warrior, wielding a Valyrian steel sword Dark Sister, which was made for a woman's hand, prompting me to believe that it was not out of the ordinary for Valyrian women to be martially trained. Visenya had the Valyrian features of purple eyes and silver gold hair, which she often braided or bound up in rings. Hers was a harsh, austere beauty, however. She was described as voluptuous, sensual and passionate, comfortable in both silk and ringmail, but also stern, serious and unforgiving. Some claim that Visenya dabbled in dark sorceries and played with poisons. Following the Valyrian custom, Aegon and Visenya, as the oldest children, were married, but Aegon took a second wife, their younger sister Rhaenys. This was uncommon but not unprecedented among the dragon lords of Valyria. It is commonly repeated that Aegon married Visenya out of duty, while Rhaenys out of desire. Visenya became a dragon rider, bonding with vhagar. Whether vhagar was ridden before or if it was a hatchling is unknown, but I'm inclined to believe in the first option, since the custom to place dragon eggs in the cradles of Targaryen children was introduced much later, and vhagar was already big enough to be a formidable force in the war, though smaller than Meraxes and Balerion at the time. Aegon and Visenya were reported to have visited Arbor and the citadel of Old Town before the conquest began, though whether they had some hidden motive in that, or if they just felt like it, is unknown. At some point, Aegon began following the fate of the Seven for what was described as political reasons, so it's likely that Visenya and Rhaenys converted as well. House of the Dragon is not canon, but we know that Aegon's dream is at least semi-canon, considering that George requested its inclusion in the show, and that it was what motivated the trio of conquerors to unify the Seven Kingdoms against the threat beyond the Wall. Visenya and Rhaenys both must have known it as well. Visenya was an active participant in Aegon's conquest, and it was Visenya who crowned Aegon with a Valyrian steel circlet. The most notable actions Visenya took during the conquest was her participation in the Field of Fire, as well as leading to a peaceful surrender of the Vale by taking Ronel Arryn flying on vhagar. Visenya also took part in day-to-day governance and would sit on the Iron Throne at times, a power that no other queen consort in the history of Westeros had after her. The hardest part of the conquest was the siblings' attempt at subjugating Dorne, which they never accomplished in spite of warring with them for almost a decade, and resulting in the death of Rhaenys in 10 AC. Visenya and Aegon were so distraught by her death that they burned every castle in Dorne at least once, with the exception of Sunspear. Visenya and Aegon both were targeted by assassins, and it was Visenya's idea to create the Kingsguard so that Aegon is better protected. After the Dornish came to King's Landing to discuss peace terms, Visenya reacted badly to seeing Meraxes' skull, though Aegon agreed to this peace after reading what was in the Dornish letter. To this day, it's unknown what was inside, and we will likely never know. Aegon and Visenya's union remained childless for a decade, but that changed after Rhaenys' death in Dorne caused her son's health to deteriorate. In 11 AC, Visenya announced her pregnancy, and the next year gave birth to Maegor. Aenys himself soon had a child on his own, Rhaena, and this caused issues in the succession. Does Rhaena have a better claim as Aenys' child, or does Maegor have a better claim as Aenys' brother? To settle this issue, Visenya suggested a betrothal between Maegor and Rhaena, but the High Septon protested and Maegor instead married his niece, Cerys Hightower. Visenya's relationship with Aegon was never particularly warm, but it grew more distant as the years progressed, and Gyldayn even suggested that Aegon avoided Visenya's presence altogether by secluding himself in Dragonstone, as she was left in charge of building the Red Keep in King's Landing. Upon Aegon's death, Aenys gifted Maegor with Blackfire, the second of the Targaryen ancestral swords, which Visenya claimed meant that Aenys lacks the necessary strength to rule. Aegon briefly served as Aenys' hand, until the brothers quarreled over Maegor taking a second wife, Alyce Haraway. Maegor did so because he believed Cerys to be barren, as she hadn't given him an heir for a decade. Visenya officiated the ceremony herself, but Aenys sent both Alyce and Maegor into exile. Next year, Visenya was present at the wedding between Aegon the Uncrowned and Rhaena, but left the feast in protest when Aenys named Aegon Prince of Dragonstone, a title which previously belonged to Maegor. Singers claim that as Visenya was flying to Dragonstone of vhagar, the moon turned red. Aenys' rule was becoming more and more chaotic as the Fate militant uprising was gaining momentum. Eventually, Aenys was forced to abandon King's Landing and flee to Dragonstone, where Visenya tried to convince him to burn Starry Sept in Old Town and Sept of Remembrance in King's Landing. Aenys instead fell ill, and while he improved under Visenya's care, he eventually suffered a collapse when he learned that his children were besieged. He died 3 days later. As soon as he was buried, Visenya flew to Pentos to retrieve Maegor from exile. With him came his wife and a mysterious woman called Tyanna of the Tower, a rumored sorceress. Maegor then seized the Iron Throne with Visenya's help, effectively usurping Aegon the Uncrowned. When Visenya challenged anyone who denied Maegor's right to rule, it resulted in the trial of 7 between Maegor and the warrior's sons. Maegor survived, though he was severely injured, and it was Tyanna who saved his life by unknown means. As Maegor took the throne, it was commonly said that he was ruled by 3 queens, Visenya, Alyce, and Tyanna, with Visenya distrusting Tyanna in particular. Visenya burned the seats of the lords who refused to bend the knee to Maegor, and almost burned Old Town alongside her son, and the new High Septon officially anointed Maegor. After the death of Aegon the Uncrowned, Visenya had Alyssa and her youngest children, jaehaerys and alysanne, as wards on Dragonstone. Soon Visenya grew thin and haggard and died. She was cremated, and her ashes scattered alongside those of her brother. The relations between Visenya and Aegon, as well as Visenya and Rhaenys, and in between all 3 of them, are a subject of a lot of speculation, both in and out of universe. Aegon and Visenya were a marriage of duty, and it was Rhaenys that Aegon married out of love. This leads many people to believe that Visenya was jealous of the attention Aegon was giving Rhaenys, since, the only thing a woman could possibly want in life is a man's attention. But there is actually not an ounce of evidence of there being any conflict between Rhaenys and Visenya. I'm pretty sure that the observers at court would have noticed if something was afloat, since they otherwise had a pretty clear picture about the personal lives of everyone involved. For instance, everyone knew that Aegon spent more nights with Rhaenys than with Visenya, and everyone knew that Visenya distrusted Tyanna. And overall, Visenya was the type of person to let someone know if she dislikes them, but she never did that for Rhaenys. Thus, it seems like Visenya and Rhaenys had a good relationship. Both Visenya and Aegon were distraught by her death in Dorne, and turned towards rage in response to it. Certainly, burning castles and people as revenge for the death of her sister is an indication that she grieved her. There was, however, conflict that the court observers did notice between Visenya and Aegon. There were several instances in which Visenya and Aegon were in disagreement, especially regarding the peace in Dorne. This isn't said anywhere openly, but I believe that Visenya never quite forgave Aegon for accepting that peace, since it would mean that Rhaenys died for nothing. After the death of their youngest sibling, the relationship between them visibly soured, and made Aegon actively avoid her companionship. That leads me to believe that Rhaenys held this group together, I actually quite like the headcanon that both Visenya and Aegon competed for Rhaenys' favor, and that it was Rhaenys who was Visenya's true love. Aegon and Visenya definitely loved each other, as siblings first and foremost. And the thing with siblings is that you always love them, but you don't always like them. But that only gives strength to my earlier hypothesis. One could argue that Visenya was keeping appearances with Rhaenys, and whatever resentments she had towards her were kept behind closed doors. But again, Visenya did not hesitate to call out Aegon's bullshit, even in public, so why would Rhaenys be any different? I also believe it's true that Aegon and Visenya were not sleeping together a lot, if they slept together at all, but there came a moment when there was no other choice. The death of Rhaenys proved that the Targaryens were mere mortals, and the line had to be secured, since Aenys, heir at this point, started regressing, and there was doubt as to whether he would even survive. Maegor comes into the picture. There are even theories according to which Visenya indeed was barren, and Maegor was conceived via blood magic, but I personally believe that Aegon and Visenya just weren't actively trying for a baby until necessity struck. So no, I don't believe that Visenya was the proverbial other woman. Nothing in the text seems to indicate it, and you know damn well someone would have reported it if there was conflict between these women. The persistence of these claims is there solely due to misogyny, which makes people believe that not only a man's attention is a woman's ultimate goal, but also that women cannot get along so long as there is a man in the picture. But then, why would Visenya even compete for the favor of a guy she was not in love with? Because she was not. She treated him like an annoying younger sibling most of the time. Aenys did eventually recover and was a fit royal heir, so Maegor functioned as a spare until Aenys had his own kids. However, the Valyrian customs of polygamy added scores to in opposition to the feudal inheritance laws of Westeros. Polygamy creates obvious problems for the succession. If a man had several wives and offspring with each of them, who was first in line of succession, the oldest child and then their children, or their siblings? And if option number 1, then what will the other children inherit? Exactly this issue arose when Aenys had his firstborn child, Rhaena, and the question arose who comes in the order of succession after him, his child or his brother. Visenya proposed a way to solve this problem by betrothing Rhaena and Maegor. A similar thing was done in Valyria, with the eldest children marrying, and this way these claims were unified. But the Fae protested, either because of incest or because the High Septon wanted to influence the dynasty. I'm inclined to believe in the second option, because uncle-niece marriages were not unheard of in Westeros, though they were happening more often in the north, where the old gods are favored. But I think that the High Septon wanted to elevate the position of his house, and this is why he suggested his own niece Jaehaerys as a bride for Maegor. I have no earthly idea why Visenya agreed to this, but whatever. The problems of inheritance and succession came in full force after Aenys' blunder at his children's wedding feast. That blunder was naming Aegon as Prince of Dragonstone. Why was Visenya so against this? Because Dragonstone was not really his to give. Sure, he was king, so technically he could do whatever he wanted, but at that point Visenya was de facto Lady of Dragonstone, and Maegor should by all means inherit this title from her as Prince of Dragonstone. In this way, we reach a compromise. The children of Aenys' body inherit the throne, whereas the side branch, the spare Maegor, gets his own seat at Dragonstone. By bestowing Dragonstone to Aegon, he left Maegor with essentially nothing for himself, so it makes sense that Visenya was outraged. We know that later on, the title of Prince or Princess of Dragonstone was bestowed to the heir presumptive, but it was not the case at the time. Visenya otherwise had good reasons to dislike Aenys, as his misrule nearly caused the premature downfall of the dynasty. Certainly, she did not have a high opinion of him, calling him a fool and a weakling, but the crucial thing was that at no point did she actively turn against him, even if he took away Dragonstone from her son. Quite the opposite. If Aenys did not want to deal with his enemies, she offered to do it for him. That is because the crucial thing towards understanding Visenya is that she was consistently putting her feelings aside for the sake of preserving the dynasty, something that was her chief motivator throughout her entire life. The reveal of Aegon's dream being at least semi-canon to this story gives an additional component to her motivation and works to recontextualize it. If from Aegon's blood comes the prince that was promised, and if she believed that a strong king must sit on the Iron Throne, then it makes sense that she eventually decided to help Maegor usurp the throne. So no, Visenya did not kill Aenys. Even the maesters writing Fire and Blood do not raise the possibility. In fact, they made sure to mention that the moment she dismissed the maesters and started to take care of him herself, his health improved. Aenys died because of a heart attack caused by the numerous stresses of his reign, and learning that his children were besieged was the final straw. Those who claim that Visenya killed Aenys should go to a reading comprehension course. And given what we know of the relationship between Visenya and Rhaenys, do you really think that Visenya would have killed the only thing that remained of her sister? It was also not a matter of a wounded pride and Maegor being skipped in the line of succession, because before, Visenya had plenty of opportunities to usurp Aenys, or even kill him. She never did, even when the kingdom was tearing itself apart because of his incompetence. This entire time, she kept offering him solutions to his problems, but he didn't listen, he died, and his children were disgraced in the eyes of the entire kingdom. So, bear with me here. Visenya did what she had to do by usurping the throne for Maegor. It was this or everything turning to ash, and if there was an overarching theme of Aegon's dream, then her actions make even more sense. The realm would not accept Aegon the Uncrowned as a ruler. Especially because at that point, he did not even have a dragon yet. Is Visenya the worst type of boy mom? To some degree, yes. But to reduce her solely to that, to claim that she randomly decided to kill her family members and put Maegor on the throne because she wanted her blood to rule, is misplaced. Visenya was extremely duty-bound and everything she did was for House Targaryen and for her family. To position that she killed Aenys just for the sake of her own ambition is to flatten her character and make her a one-dimensional villainess. It's not a coincidence that Visenya wielded a sword that was called Dark Sister. She indeed was Aegon's Dark Sister, but the significance of that sword goes far beyond its badass name, and it all started precisely with Visenya. While Blackfire was, at least to a certain point, a kind of a ceremonial sword of the kings who sat the throne, Dark Sister usually ended up in the hands of the Spares, the second sons, and those who were in the shade of the heir. After Visenya, it was wielded by Balon, a second son and a Spare, who avenged his brother's death with it. Daemon, the second son, who used it to defend his queen, to which he subjugated his own claim to. Aemon the Dragon Knight, a second son and a Kingsguard, who died defending his brother and likely did so with Dark Sister. And most importantly, Brynden Rivers, a Targaryen bastard who dedicated a significant portion of his life towards defending and protecting the main line of House Targaryen against House Blackfire. Among those, Visenya, Brynden and Daemon all had a certain reputation that often bordered on negative, but at the core, their lives were dedicated, and even sacrificed, to the defense of their family and the dynasty. I like to think that Visenya's spirit survived in that sword, either metaphorically or literally. The only thing that always annoyed me is how this sword never again found its way to a woman's hand, for which it was originally designed. While Targaryen women were not martially trained after Visenya, I can think of several Dark Sisters who should have wielded it. Baela especially comes to mind. An overlooked jaehaerys defending her half-brother Aegon III would have been a sight to behold. I can only hope that if this sword ever makes an appearance, it does end up in a woman's hand. That being said, Visenya was, of course, not perfect. Nobody in this story is, and Visenya did plenty of things that were morally wrong. That's because human beings are grey and sometimes make bad decisions, even if they have good reasons. But to reduce Visenya to nothing but a psycho boy mom is to make her into a fully black character, and that is not how this story works. It has to be underscored that it was not some inherent cruelty that led her to back Maegor, but what she believed was necessity for the dynasty's survival, as well as the existential threat she was well aware of. Fate militant had to be dealt with if the kingdom was to stay united under the Iron Throne. And if Aenys was not willing to take decisive action, then what other choice was there if not to give them fire and blood? You don't solve religious extremism with peaceful negotiations. And if Maegor hadn't acted the way he did, you can be damn sure jaehaerys would have been plagued by the fake militant uprisings throughout his reign as well. And the remains of those times did come to haunt him anyway, after alysanne was attacked by the extremists. Visenya was one of the many women who fought Rhaena the Black Bride as well. It was Maegor's rise to power backed by Visenya that eventually made her his hostage, but the fault first and foremost lies with Maegor, so I find it puzzling that some people have more smoke for Visenya than for Rhaena's rapist and abuser himself. I don't think Rhaena ever blamed Visenya anyway. If she did, she would not invoke her name in her conversation with jaehaerys. She is Rhaenys and I am Visenya, about herself and alysanne. Now, was Visenya a witch who dabbled in dark arts and poisons? I don't think so. When you read Fire and Blood, you will see that basically every woman who does not fit into the archetype of feudal womanhood gets accused of that. Even Rhaena was not spared from these accusations. A warrior woman from a scary Eastern civilization was doomed to be called that one way or another. If there was a witch in Maegor's circle, then that was Tyanna. Maegor and Aenys represented the very extremes of their mothers' personalities, and at the core, neither of them were fit to sit the throne. Visenya, however, did not usurp the throne solely because she was an overly ambitious psycho, but because she knew that only Maegor can deal with the fate militant. She did not kill Aenys, she was not the other woman, and she was not a witch. Probably. But the fact that this complex character, who by all means is very clear in what motivated her, gets flattened into nothing but a deranged villain, shows that Song's fans will never beat the medieval peasants' allegations. And they will never accept or allow for female characters to have the same moral greyness and complexity they otherwise praise in male characters. In short, the LGBT community forgives Visenya for being a boy mom. She did what had to be done. Thanks for watching. Remember that if you like my content, like, subscribe and share so that more people can see it. Make sure to click the notification button so that you never miss a new video. And remember, Phoenix rises from the ashes, and ashes always land on top.